Um, there- I want to welcome and thank everyone for joining us today. We're really appreciative to the community members, the residents, the city staff who are able to take part in this today and have a conversation on the safety enhancements occurring on Saratoga Avenue. For those of you who do frequent that area, you can see that there has been the beginnings of some work there. This work will increase safety and a sense of security for pedestrians, really try to look at minimizing incidents for cyclists and reducing collisions of vehicles. Many residents have expressed that that it is vital that we offer residents more access to our roads. And, especially for students who use uh, uh, and need safer routes to school and do everything we can to have uh, zero traffic induced fatalities within our community. The city is conducting these improvements to help us get closer to that reality. And it's really extremely important to me and to our city to have the community involved and kept informed of what is happening in this process. For that reason, I'm really happy that we're hosting this meeting tonight and that the DOT staff involved here today will discuss the work with the community and take input. Staff will give a presentation on what is happening there. I do know that there were other members of the community who wanted to attend, but because of other meetings are not able to. So that is one of the reasons why we do have this recording. We will make it available, and it will also be on my website for anyone who wishes to review what had been shared. So with that, welcome everybody, and I'm going to turn it over to Anna Lay, who is the Associate Transportation Specialist. We're going to try to go through the presentation, and then after the presentation, we'll take your questions and have a Q&A. If you want to put your questions in the chat, we will go to those first. So feel free to continue putting questions in the chat. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anna Lay. I am the Community Engagement Manager with the Department of Transportation. I am thrilled to be here today to share with you the Saratoga Traffic Safety Enhancement Project. We have a short presentation, and like Vice Mayor mentioned, if you can hold off of your question to the end, or you can enter your question during using the chat function during the meeting. With me today, we have city staff that are here to answer any question or respond to any feedback that you might have. At this time, I would like to introduce Vu Dao. He's our senior engineer that will present the project to you. With that, Vu, take it away.
Thank you, Anna. A pleasant good evening to all of you. My name is Vu Dao. I am an engineer with the Department of Transportation. Welcome and thank you for your time this evening. We are here to share with you an exciting traffic safety improvement project on Saratoga Avenue. This project will make Saratoga safer for you, your family, and your neighbors, and all the roadway users, whether they walk, bike, take transit, or drive. With that said, I'd like to share my screen. I have a presentation that I'd like to share with you. Give me a couple seconds and I will bring it up on your screen. Okay, please give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen. That is great. Okay, so why Saratoga? Why this project? Well, the city of San Jose recognized that one traffic death is one too many. Unfortunately, last year, we lost 65 members of our community due to traffic violence. In 2015, San Jose adopted Division Zero Safety Initiative, which aims to reduce and ultimately eliminate traffic fatalities and severe injury crashes on our roadways. And as part of that process, Saratoga was identified as one of the Vision Zero priority safety corridor with a high frequency of traffic-related crashes, which has a need for safety improvements. It's the San Jose Better Bike Plan 2025, which is a plan seek to make bicycling safer and convenient for all ages and abilities in our city. I recommended protect the bike lanes on Saratoga. Currently, Saratoga does not have bike lanes. The West San Jose Multimodal Transportation Improvement Plan identifies Saratoga as one of the corridors to be considered for traffic safety improvements with features that would enhance safety for people walking, biking, or taking transit. And Saratoga is part of this year pavement rehabilitation program, and that provide us with a perfect opportunity to make changes to our roadway to make it safer and to accommodate more modes of transportation. So all these plans and the opportunity help shape and guide us to making Saratoga safer. So objective uh, our main objective, primary objective, is of course to improve safety for all roadway user. We want to make it safer for pedestrian, increase their visibility, safety, and comfort. We want to provide more protection for bicyclists, minimize the conflicts, and of course create a lower stress environment for them to ride, to bike. And we want to make it safer in general by making improvements to the intersection and reduce vehicular speed. Speeding continues to be the leading known cause of traffic crashes that resulted in fatalities and serious injuries. So when we have the opportunity to redesign our roadways, we always aim to make speed less enticing. So how do we do it? Here are the components of this project. Pavement resurfacing. So the pavement will be treated, we'll replace the old pavement with new asphalt, and that will provide us with a clean canvas to work with. This is a typical practice that we do where we leverage pavement program to add safety improvements. And as part of that, we can reconfigure the excess travel lanes, taking it from a 6 to a 4 lane and reallocate that extra space to provide for better quality bike lanes. And the bike lanes will be on both sides of the roadway. It will extend for the entire project limits. We will make the improvements to the intersection, and that would include high visibility crosswalk striping, bicycle detections, and minor traffic signal modification to include hardware and signal timing upgrades. We will be upgrading the existing old streetlight LEDs fixture to the newer ones, and they will be brighter and even more energy efficient. And we will add several radar speed signs to alert drivers of their speed and help to slow them down as they are traversing through this corridor. So let's talk about the existing travel lane configuration. So one of the key components of this project is to reconfigure the travel lane. Saratoga has inconsistent number of travel lanes. So if you were to look at the map in front of you, as you can see, the segment in blue at both ends carries 6 lanes of traffic, and that is 3 lanes in each direction. Where the segment in yellow in the middle currently carries 4 lanes of traffic, 2 in each direction. So approximately 40% of Saratoga within the project limit, it's already operating with this 4-lane facility. So what are we proposing to do is to take this 4-lane segment, which is the yellow segment, and extending it to the north or to the right of your screen to Williams, and extending it to the south or to the left of your screen to Prospect. And if you were to look at the bottom image, it's a rendering of the existing segment in the 6-lane facility. Currently, there's no bike lanes. There are 3 lanes in each direction. And because it's so wide, drivers tend to drive faster. And as you recall, speed is a top known primary collision factor that resulted in a fatal or severe injuries, crashes in our roadway. So by reconfiguring the roadway or the travel lane, or removing 1 lane in each direction, in the 6-lane segment, we will be able to make the roadway narrower, and we will help reduce speed and increase safety for all. And we can reallocate that extra space to protect the bike lanes. Okay, so how will it look like? So this is how it would look like. As you recall in the previous screen, the existing condition, the yellow segment or the 4-lane segment is only in the middle of the project limits. By extending the yellow segment or the 4-lane segment to Williams and extending it to Prospect, we create a continuous segment of 4-lane roadway going from Prospect to Williams. And if you look at the bottom rendering, it will look similar to what you see here. There will be 2 lanes in each direction, separated by the existing median island, and you'll see that there are bike lanes on both sides of the street. Over the years, we have done many successful projects using this type of treatment. And from our experience, we see that there could be an increase in the travel time, but the big trade-off is safety. It helps reduce vehicle speeds, reduce crashes, and improve safety for all roadway users. Bike lanes. We talk a little bit about bike lanes, that Saratoga currently does not have bike lanes. So the bike lanes will be new, will be striped on both sides and with the appropriate signage to clearly delineate the spacing for bicyclists. At the intersection, there will be green pavement areas to make it even more clear to the drivers. There will be a buffer spacing, as you can see here where the hatch is between the bike lane and the travel lane, to provide that buffer between the bicyclist and the driver. And we can consider adding in the vertical delineators between the buffer area to provide more protection for the bicyclists. Now, our plan in the near future is to come back and upgrade this buffer area to more permanent, substantial physical separation. Intersection and other improvements, as I mentioned earlier, there will be improvements at the intersection. At the intersection, we will be upgrading all of the standard 2-line crosswalk to what we call high visibility crosswalk. As you can see from the bottom left image, it is much more visible to the driver, increase the yield rate, and it make it safer for pedestrians, clearly delineate their spacing. There will be minor signal modifications. It does include hardwares and also signal timing. We'll upgrade the existing 8-inch signal heads or the smaller size signal heads to a bigger size signal heads. We'll be adding the yellow border around the back plate of the signal heads, as you can see from the top left image. It makes it very visible to the drivers, capture their attention, and reduce a lot of red light running and such. Other improvement includes upgrading of streetlight fixture These are LED existing, but they have been installed for over a decade now, and they are much older generation streetlights. So we will be upgrading all of them for the entire limit of the project to the newer LED fixture. They are brighter and they are more energy efficient. The other item is we will be installing radar speed signs. These are the feedback signs that capture the driver's speed as they are approaching the sign. It increases driver awareness of their speed and help to slow them down as they are driving through the corridor. Now, in order to make the design work for the striping of the bike lanes and also the lane reallocation, unfortunately, in some area, there will be a parking space reallocation or parking loss on this map. In the area that you see the red lines, the tiny red lines, those are the approximate area where we expect the parking will be lost, and there are numbers right next to it, and those are the expected numbers of parking space that will be reallocated to other usage. Now, the team did a parking assessment in December of last year, and we also did another one this month. And what we found is many of this area, the parking usage is very low. In some area, parking usage is zero, meaning there were no cars observed park in those area during the time of visit, and it can range up to 36% usage. In some area, for example, the number 14 that you see here, uh, 3 times that we went out there, different days, different times, there were no cars parked there. It is in front of a small shopping plaza that has plenty of on-street parking. There's also some in front of office building that have their own parking um, lot that can facilitate the off-street parking. In some area, it's in front of residential homes where they do have driveways and they do have additional on-street parking away from the immediate impact area. Next steps. So the next step is for us to finalize the permanent striping. Currently, as you may have seen already, that there is pavement work that has been completed. And the striping that you see out there, those are the temporary stripings. They are not the permanent striping. So in this month and next month, we can finalize on the permanent striping before the contractor comes in to stripe it permanently with thermoplastic striping. And then after that, we will have the improvements that I mentioned, the radar sign, the street lights, and several other things that I have covered during my presentation. If you have any questions or feedback, we are here to answer your question and respond to your questions and concern. We have colleagues on the call also to help address your concern. But if you feel that our response is not adequate or you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to our community outreach manager, NLA, at the email here. And you can also reach out to our Vice Mayor Office Chief of Staff, Mr. David Gomez, with the email here. So with that, Anna, I'd like to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Vu. That concludes our presentation. And at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce David and Omar, who will take the lead in facilitating the Q&A section.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you to staff for the presentation. My name is Omar Dean. I work for the Vice Mayor as a policy aide and council assistant. And so thank you again, everyone, for being here today. Like the Vice Mayor mentioned, it was important to us that we record tonight's meeting, so anyone who wasn't able to join will still get access to the conversation that we have tonight. We're going to be making a recording of this meeting available afterwards, so if you'd like a copy, feel free to put your email address in the chat, and it'll be sent out afterwards. But to jump off the conversation, I see that Mike in the chat asked, when will the physical barriers be put up to make the bike lanes a true class 4? Hopefully I'm reading the Roman numerals correctly.
Yes, that is correct. Yes. Mike, thank you for your question. Apparently, you know a lot about bike lanes. Yes, Class 4 is protected bike lanes, and Mike is referring to the physical barriers between the bike lane and the travel lane that I mentioned earlier in the buffer area to provide more protection for bicyclists. So we are looking at also potentially upgrading the buffer area to more substantial civil improvement. But depending on the timeline of that, if we see that it will not be coming in the near future, then we will be putting up the delineators, which is the plastic posts that you've seen in the bike lane pictures image that I show here. So it's at this moment we need to clearly understand the timeline. But again, if the future work is not within the foreseeable future, then we will go out there to put these up. And these are relatively easy to put up, and these are considered as quick build material where it is relatively affordable, quick and easy to install and remove. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. And I'll continue with questions in the chat as well, but if you want to ask your question out loud, feel free to raise your digital hand and we'll alternate between people with their hands raised and questions from the chat. And so I see an M. Paulinger. If you want to unmute, feel free to chime in with a question.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for making all these improvements. I think they're definitely needed for Saratoga. So as a resident of the area, one concern I see is people making left turns across traffic lanes through the center divide from shopping centers and side streets and so forth. Are there going to be any changes to limit those kind of left turns? Because those are now also going to transit across the bike lanes, and typically people, in my experience, don't tend to look for bike traffic, they look for cars.
That's a great question. I am looking at the plans as I am speaking. And you're referring to the segment between Lawrence Expressway and Prospect?
No, I'm referring to the section particularly north of Doyle and extending pretty much all the way to Williams, where there's lots of strip malls and shopping centers and businesses that line the street, and you're able to turn left out of them across the two lanes, to go whichever left turn means for you.
I see.
And if there was a physical center divide there, there would be no way to do that, and you would have to go to the nearest, U-turn or turn pocket.
Right. Well, thank you. I understand your question now. As part of this project, we are not restricting any access. That is my understanding. I also have our lead designer, Mr. Zahi Katab. He is our principal engineer on the call with me, just in case if we have any specific detailed design question. But Zahi, please correct me if I'm not right, that we are not restricting any access at the intersection as well as the segment that the caller mentioned. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you, Vu. Good evening, everyone. That's correct. We, as part of the restriping exercise, we're really not looking at changing access and circulation. We're not making those median recommendations, if you may, to change access and circulation. or restrict those left out maneuvers that are typically for us on major arterials or 6-lane arterials. We've been prohibiting them on arterials like Saratoga. Now, because Saratoga is getting reduced with this proposal from 6 to 4 lanes, that left out maneuver that you're describing becomes just a tad less risky, obviously, because there's a little bit less conflict, but still, it is a preference, but we're not making those recommendations with this restriping exercise. But it may be something that we can actually get into, like Vu mentioned, with the very next iteration, which is this minor civil improvement. Hope this answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zahi.
And I'll go into the next question from the chat. And just as a reminder to everyone again, feel free to leave your email if you would like to get a recording, or even if you just want to stay in touch with our office, because as the Vice Mayor said, we love making sure that the community is as involved as possible. And so one of the other questions in the chat is from Arthur. He asks if planning has taken into account the additional volume of traffic with some of the future growth of Costco and housing being built into the area.
That's a great question. Thank you, Arthur. Yes, so we did look at what we call operational analysis to understand how the signalized intersection function and work when we propose the lane reduction with the anticipated future volume. So the consultant did look at that scenario. And what we found is there's not a lot of significant congestion. There is going to be some delay, and it can range anywhere from 4 seconds to 30 seconds, depending on which intersection. Obviously, each intersection function different because of the traffic pattern and the traffic coming into the intersection. But depending on which intersection, it can range anywhere from 4 seconds to a 30-second delay. But we don't see that it's going to be a drastic change in the operation. But to answer your question, yes, we did look at the future growth, what we call forecast volume, with the approved developments in the area. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. And Suyash, I see you have your hand raised. Would you like to unmute?
Hi, I just wanted to start off by saying I'm a big fan of the proposed changes. I bike every week, but I often avoid Saratoga because right now it's pretty dangerous. What I wanted to ask was, you guys said speeding was the biggest cause of accidents, and that but you're also going to install radar street signs. I was just thinking, could we just have automated ticketing instead? Because there are many existing studies that showcase the effectiveness of sending tickets and reducing accidents.
Thank you. I appreciate your question. So currently, the state of California does not allow for automated speed enforcement. We do have, well, California allow us to do automated red light running, however, not speed enforcement. There was previous effort to go to legislation, which it's failed. I know that there was a recent effort to go again, and it has passed through the floor. I am not sure how far it went into the process, but cross our finger, and if it does go through the process and if it gets voted into law, then yes, agency will be allowed to use automated speed enforcement to enforce speeding along these major corridors. But currently, at the moment, we are not allowed to do it by law.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And one of the questions in the chat from Yves is, how are you going to add bike lanes in the original 4-lane section?
Great, thank you. So we are able to, with the cross section that we have, in some area there will be challenge. And of course, because of that, unfortunately, I mentioned early in one of the slides is that we have to use the parking space area to reallocate it to the bike lane. So unfortunately, because in some area there's constriction, there's not enough lane width or the cross section as we call it, we will have to take up the on-street parking, but only in certain area. But with Zahi and his team, we're able to design it and we'll make it work.
Okay, thank you. And another question from Kathy is, has the reduction of traffic lanes on Saratoga been checked for impact to traffic studies done in projects like El Paseo, Costco, and new development at the end of the Saratoga Ave? So I know that's a little similar to the other Costco question, but I'm guessing specifically to the other studies that I've done, have they taken this work into account?
Yeah, yes. So as I mentioned earlier, yes. So you're correct. This question is very similar to the Costco traffic forecast earlier that the caller had, and I will provide the same response. Is yes. When we look at the operation analysis of the signalized intersection to understand, to forecast how they perform under the new configuration, taking into account of the approved developments in the area, including the Costco. So we did look at that, and we did see that there's going to be some minor traffic delay. But again, just like any lane reduction project that we did, we see success, but we also saw that there is decrease in the travel time. But decrease in the travel time does not always mean a negative thing. It could mean a good thing. That's when I had mentioned over and over again that speeding continues to be the top known primary collision factor that cause a fatal or a severe injury crashes in our roadway. So by slowing down, more cars slowing down, it's actually sometimes is a good thing. You reduce the speed, reduce the severity, the risk of people getting to the crash, and reduce the severity of the crash.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And Em, I see you have your hand raised, but I'm just going to go to Anwar first because it's his first question, and then we'll circle back for people who want to ask again. And so Anwar's question is, what timeline should we expect to transition from plastic to concrete barriers for the bike lanes? Also, who or which office can we reach out to for future updates on the bike lane? I'll actually answer the last one first, which is our office. You'll see our office contact at the end of this presentation, but I'm going to put the email for our district office and my own San Jose email into the chat, and you can reach out to us for questions related to this. And definitely keep an eye on the Vice Mayor's newsletter. The Vice Mayor is really good at making sure that any information that's pertinent to the community, especially on issues like that, end up in her newsletter. So that's that answer. And then we can go back to staff for the timeline for transitioning from plastic to concrete barriers.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. I kind of alluded to it earlier that we do have plans to go back and upgrade the buffer area to more substantial separators or separation. Currently, we don't have a concrete timeline just yet. It is currently in the planning, early design phase, and we would need to take a closer look at it and determine when we can go back out to construct these more substantial civil improvement along the buffer area. But that is something that we can provide to the community once we have a more concrete timeline, and definitely keep in touch with us, and we can provide updates on that as we have a more concrete timeline.
Thank you. And Em, if you want to go ahead and unmute, you can chime in with your question.
Sorry, did you mean me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I heard another name. Yeah, so my question is, what would it take for this to go all the way from 280 to the north and 85 to the south? How was the scope of this chosen? Because there's two major school sites, north of Williams, the Blackford campus, the Harker campus, And then, going south all the way to 85, that's a pretty fraught corridor there because there's limited side streets. So speed is pretty high as well, although there is a little bit more protected bike lane over there. So what would it take to do that? Maybe if it was coordination with Saratoga, or, how is the scope of this decided, and what would it take to expand?
Great, thank you for your question. It's a great question. So I mentioned earlier that we typically leverage our pavement program to add safety improvements. Now, the segment between Lawrence Expressway to Williams is up for this year for pavement rehabilitation. Now, the segment south of Williams is not. So that is the reason why we are using this segment as the project limits. That's because if within the payment program limits, I know that north of Williams is already have bike lanes on both sides. I am not sure of the future in terms of how we extend this project to the north or to the south. What I do know is we are tackling this segment this season and now. Zahi, do you have anything to add to respond to the callers?
Well, I could add a little bit. I mean, chime in. So the segment from Williams all the way up to Stevens Creek was done in 2018, summer, fall, and it never had bikeways before then. So we did add the buffered bike lanes there. So that's from Williams north of our segment. And segment in Saratoga, what I know through coordination is, I believe, and don't quote me because it is Saratoga, but I believe Saratoga is on the paving list as well, and they are adding buffered bike lanes next year. So, but that's again
great.
City Saratoga from Lawrence all the way to 85 and beyond.
Okay, thank you. And I'm
That's
glad
great.
there's
Thank you.
coordination with Saratoga.
Okay, thank you. And then Arthur is asking, have there been any studies about how many bikes travel down this road?
From our team, we don't, but I am going to look to my colleagues in the department who also work in different division, whether there was any counts that was done. So I'm looking to you, Zahi, and Wilson, if you're in the room. But for this project, we did not look at how many bikes that are going through Saratoga. I know it is part of the Better Bike Plan 2025, and I am not sure if as part of the major plan, a major study, if they specifically look at each segment to understand what's the bike volume. But I'm going to defer to any of my colleagues if they know that it was studied as part of the Better Bike Way or Bike Plan 2025.
Yeah, I don't have that information offhand, unfortunately, but I'll tell you that when we do collect volumes or counts for vehicles, we do count for bikes as well. And those volumes that we collect, whether it's for vehicles and for bike as well, they're typically correlated with some sort of a project, whether it's a private development project, an impact, or like Vu mentioned, the master plan or complete street study, so on and so forth. So Vu, for your specific project, I know we did an analysis for but it didn't actually collect new volumes. It actually relied on existing volumes. Now there are two different folks that I can queue, either Wilson or Ryan, to see whether the bike plan or the corridor study did collect volumes and would have those counts as part of the bike counts. But again, typically the bike count is going to be very, very minuscule if you actually don't have the facility. Keep that in mind that we're introducing a brand new facility. If the facility didn't exist at all, then yeah, your count's going to be not relevant to this project, right?
I can add briefly on our bike plan. So City Council adopted a new bike plan in October 2020, which Vu mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. And the bike plan looked at ways to increase access and improve safety for people riding bikes across the city, knowing that streets like Saratoga that don't have bike lanes, or streets that have very, very basic bike lanes, aren't really conducive to people riding. Maybe the people who are most comfortable would choose to use them, but the majority of people wouldn't. So one of the reasons for taking on such kind of progressive design like we have here is to really encourage more people to ride and give them space. So the bike plan looked more at assessing the needs that people have, the reasons why people do or don't ride where they do, and kind of some best practices and other things like land use, safety, transportation network in general. And it did not specifically look at the number of people riding bikes on any corridor.
Okay, thank you. And I'm
Can I
just gonna
quickly add, sorry,
yes, please.
just quickly add to the last question that as Zahi said, the development projects such as like Costco, El Paseo, as part of their transportation impact studies, they did use recently collected data for the purpose of their operational analysis. So if you would like to have a copy of the data that are used for those studies, we can send the data for you. But also note that because of the pandemic, the data we use for the purpose of the studies are the pre-pandemic situation. So looking at like 2019 data, if that makes sense.
Thank you. That information is definitely very helpful. And I'm looking through the chat. I think that was the last question. Oh, sorry, no, there are a couple more. And so I think Arthur as well asked the next one, and which is I would like more details about the traffic studies. My experience with these studies are in the just trying to understand the sentence syntax there. My experience with these studies, and I like they are not. Sorry, Arthur, I'm having a little bit of trouble deciphering what you wrote there, but I think just more details about how traffic studies are made perhaps might be helpful.
This is Arthur.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Sorry about the mistype. Yeah, I mean, based on where I live, which is not off Saratoga Avenue, but off a different street, the information I've gotten, to me, these traffic studies are basically worthless. So I'd like to have a lot more detail about these studies, because I can have a hard time believing that if Costco goes in and El Paseo gets built out to what they say they want to build it out, that's not going to impact traveling on Saratoga Avenue. You know, you're talking about probably 800 or so cars a day going to Costco. If you have 1,000 units or roughly 1,000 people living in El Paseo, that's probably easily 750 additional vehicles. So I've always questioned those. I know other meetings I've been at where they presented traffic studies, everybody tore apart the traffic studies because they didn't take into account home delivery of packages. They didn't take into account the realistic volume of cars, the timing of things. So I would like to see some more details about this traffic study.
Yeah, thank you. And so to city staff, just maybe you can highlight some information on how these numbers are arrived to. I know you have a very rigorous process, and maybe highlighting that might help. And we definitely want to keep more insights into the Saratoga project specifically. I know there are a lot of other projects in the area too, but when you're talking about Saratoga and specifically this project, how do those traffic studies come together?
I am looking at my colleague who is much more familiar with a traffic study than I am. I'm curious to know if any of my colleagues can help answer that question from Omar. Omar, your question was, how do all of these traffic study come together?
Kind of. I mean, I think just
Yeah.
based off of some of the
Yeah.
comments we're hearing from Arthur,
No.
what
Yeah,
maybe staff can
I
highlight just the data collection part of that. How do you arrive at those figures?
I can chime in, and maybe Wilson can fill in the blanks as well. So there is a rigorous process for collecting data and what gets considered to be collected and what's in the background. And, you know, it does account for many of the things that you've mentioned, whether it's existing volumes, background volumes, future projections, future growth, etc. And So those studies that are done by private developers are actually very intricate and very detailed. They are available for you to review, and that'll give you a very good sense of how much intricacy they get into and they provide. Wilson, please chime in if I missed anything.
You nailed it, Zahi. I would add that as Zahi said, when a traffic study is done, we're not taking the project as a silo. We account for everything that is going on or being proposed right now. So when you mentioned about the Paseo project and the Costco project, when we do a particular traffic study, we account for everything that is being proposed. So all the trips associated with each of the developments are accounted for in the study. Now, I think Vu mentioned earlier in the presentation that when we talk about reducing a lane of travel, right, a travel lane, like there will be additional delay. And I think we don't need a study to validate that. We all know that when we take away a travel lane, there will be more congestion. And so to your question, like it's really about like what's the level of acceptability, like how much additional congestion would be accepted by the city or by the community, and that's the key point of any traffic study. A degradation from a level of surface B to a C or a D to an E does not mean much unless we know what level of surface E actually mean to the community, and is this something that the community accept? And again, there's a trade-off, right? There's a delay is associated with speed. So as Vu said earlier, the reason why we are working on this safety improvement project is to reduce speed and improve safety. So that's a trade-off. If you want more congestion, then it may improve safety. But if we want to accept less congestion, there will be higher speed and maybe less safe. So that's the trade-off that we really want to navigate through with the community, and all the feedback today are very helpful in our consideration.
Okay, thank you so much, Wilson. And Em, I see you have your hand raised. M. Pollinger. Oh, I think his hand went down.
Sorry. Yeah, I unmuted. So a couple of years ago on Doyle Road, there were traffic calming measures put in front of Easterbrook Discovery School, things like bulb outs and flashing crosswalk indicators and so forth. You haven't mentioned or talked much about pedestrian safety, and particularly on Saratoga at intersections like Graves and Payne Avenue and Williams, where people do walk across for either shopping or there's the post office and the library. I've seen a lot of close calls over the years, particularly at Payne, where there's a through right turn lane from the westbound Payne to northbound Saratoga. And can you speak more about what kind of improvements you're making for pedestrian safety, and if you're doing things like those flashing crosswalks or other calming measures at the intersections?
Vu, I think you're muted.
My apologies. Thank you for the question. You're referring to flashing beacon crosswalk. Now, typically we would install the flashing beacons at uncontrolled crosswalk, marked crosswalk, meaning that the crosswalk is not controlled by a traffic signal or by a stop sign. It is uncontrolled. Then we would supplement it with the flashing beacons where the pedestrian would trigger the beacon and it will flash and capture the driver attention. We do not have any uncontrolled crossing or crosswalk along this segment of the roadway. That's number one. Number two is some of the intersection that you mentioned, Payne and Graves. These are all signalized intersections, so they are controlled by a traffic signal. And I did mention earlier in one of the slides in the presentation is that we will be adding or upgrading all of the standard crosswalk, which is a 2 lines only, to high visibility crosswalk, which is the piano key looking. It will create more awareness, makes it a lot visible to the drivers, clearly delineate the space for pedestrian. So that's number one that we do. Number two is we will also look at the timing for pedestrian crossing the street, to make sure that the timing is right, to ensure that they have enough time to cross the street, take into consideration of any high risk vulnerable populations such as older folks or younger folks if it's near a school. Then we'll take a look at and see if the timing is programmed correctly. The other thing is we are also upgrading all of the signal, smaller signal heads from an 8-inch signal head to a 12-inch signal head. And we will also be adding the yellow reflective borders around the signal head to make it a lot more visible. And I'm sure you have seen those as you are driving through the city. We start to convert many of them to the yellow reflective borders. So those are a few things that we are doing to make the intersection safer, increase driver awareness, and just improve safety in general at the intersection.
Thank you. That was a great explanation. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I see Suyash is asking that they're curious about why we can't build concrete barriers during the initial construction of the bike lane, similar to the ones that Santa Monica had done.
There's a few things, and that's because we are leveraging the pavement program. And the pavement program, the contractor will come in and do the pavement, and shortly after that, they are required to come back to stripe the roadway with permanent striping. So it is already part of their contract that they'll be putting the bike lane striping and the associated elements with the bike lane. So for silver improvement, more substantial, it takes longer time for us to design it. Not only that, we'll have to have the funding to provide for the design as well as the construction. So there's a couple key things that needs to work together in order for us to go out together with the pavement. And usually pavement happens very quickly, and it's a lot of time it's hard for us to marry it together. So a lot of time we would do what we call quick build improvements, like I mentioned, with the paint and the plastic, and then we'll come back to upgrade those into more substantial physical barrier.
Okay, thank you. And just as a heads up to everyone, we have about 5 minutes left. And so I'll try and get in any last questions I'm seeing here. I believe this is Mike Cray's first question, unless I'm mistaken. So I'm gonna, oh no, Mike, you asked the first questions at first. So if there's anyone that hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet, I do want to just give you this one opportunity. If you can get it in, I'm going to prioritize people who haven't yet. But otherwise, going to Mike Cray, you wrote that apparently some street parking will remain on both sides of Saratoga Ave. Might this parking at some point be removed to improve bike safety and perhaps cause not many parking issues?
So we try to balance out. We know that there are some part that on-street parking is a higher demand, where folks will need to have the on-street parking to provide for the demand. So removing all parkings may not be feasible. But we are looking at the design for the future, build out the silver improvement. But at this point, I am not sure if that is going to be the case where we are going to remove all the parking. So I cannot certainly say if that is going to be the case. Zahir, do you have anything to add to that?
No, this is pretty comprehensive, but I just want to note that it's not necessarily always safer to remove parking. Just the added dimension, the cross section, the parking takes away, the friction that it actually probably adds as well may help alleviate some of the speeding or the unutilized shoulders or the clay recovery zones to the right hand side of the travel. So it's not like removing parking is always going to be a safer approach. It might be used to actually also protect the bikeway, to be on the left side of the bikeway for a class 4 implementation. So we look at it in a very strategic way of where parking is, again, utilization, safety, cross section, etc. But removing parking could be safer in some situations, but not always.
Thank you. And I'm gonna go to P. Watkins next for our last question, and then after that, I'm gonna turn it back over to the Vice Mayor to close us off today. So P, if you want to unmute, you can ask your question.
Yes, hi. Just wondering, two questions. First of all, it sounds like you're saying that Costco is a done deal, so that I'd like that addressed. And secondly, it sounds like from your studies, you're hoping that everybody uses Lawrence Expressway as opposed to Saratoga Avenue to get to Westgate West, where presently we have Trader Joe's, State Farm, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to defer that question to my fellow colleagues who is much more familiar with the development side. I think you have asked two questions. One is you would like to know if Costco is a done deal. And number two is that the assumption is made that more traffic will be using Lawrence Expressway. I did not work on this project, so my apology, I cannot answer that question, but I'm looking to my colleagues to see if that's something that they can help address.
Yeah, the only information I know about the Costco project is that they're looking at circulating their environmental document or their EIR in the next few months, perhaps weeks. But they have had a kind of a fast start and they slowed down for a bit. We have not seen them come back for a while. But there will be an environmental document or public document circulated for you to comment on and engage in, and it'll go to council for approval, et cetera, per process. I don't have much of a comment on the utilization of, the county expressway versus Saratoga to get to that, but the expressway obviously has more capacity than what Saratoga will have.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry, Wilson.
I was going to add that relatively, as Zahi said, expressway has more vehicular capacity. So, it's more convenient for drivers to use expressway than Saratoga. And I think Suyash has an earlier comment in the chat also that like Route 57 is also riding on Saratoga. If we want to dedicate some space for a potential transit improvement project in the future, relatively speaking, you may be right that the expressway may be a more convenient vehicular route than Saratoga.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I know we're right against 7 o'clock, so I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Mayor to close us off. And thank you again so much to everyone who participated tonight.
Thank you so much, Omar. And just to let you know, the Costco project is not a done deal. It is a proposal. And when staff takes into account any future proposed items, that is part of what the future growth may or may not be. But as been mentioned, there is an environmental impact report that's going to come out. And at this point in time, if you get my newsletter, you will learn that it's been pushed to perhaps October timeframe. It's been moved many times, so no guarantee on that, but there is a process and it is not done. It has not gone to the Planning Commission. It has not gone to City Council. And so hopefully that answers your question. As far as I do want to, I know we're kind of running late here, but I do want to mention that someone asked about funding for this project and for how much. And that's something that I think, I don't know if you have those, but I believe it's Measure T on the pavement program. And the exact dollar amount I don't have, but that's something that we could perhaps share with you later on and let people know what that is, unless there's somebody from staff who has a quick response to that question.
I'm sorry, I do not have the answer to that question.
Okay,
Since
well,
because yes.
Yeah, that's something that we can take back and make sure that we do answer that question. But again, I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy evening to be here to stay informed. We will be sharing this. It will also, the recording will be part of on my website. And, you know, certainly if you want to stay more in touch, I'd be happy to reach out. Please reach out to my office, as well as the NLA's information was also on the presentation. So hopefully you got that. And with that, I think we will say good evening.